Hello, welcome to Pale Blooms and Beyond. Thank you for joining us today. If you do like the programming you see here and the musicians and artists that I visit with, please be sure and hit the like button below and also subscribe to the channel. Mark Reeder is an English-born musician, remixer, record producer, and the head of several record labels, including MFS and Flesh. Mark has made his home in Berlin, Germany since 1978. He began his journey in the early 80s with Die Unbekannten, translated to English as The Unknown Ones. The unit was also known as Necropolis. I first came upon Mark's work with the band Shark Vegas, the band Die Unbekannten morphed into. Shark Vegas would record the single You Hurt Me on Factory Records in 1984, which was remixed by New Order's Bernard Sumner. The track would become a big dance club hit during the mid-80s. From 1989 to 1991, Mark would head up the MFS project Alien Nation. 10 Forward would occupy Mark Reeder's life and attention from the period 1996 to 1997. And more recently, my guest has been collaborating with singer-songwriter Alanas Chosnau. I hope I've hit a few of the high points, and I'm going to rely on Mark to fill in the gaps, particularly as it pertains to his remix work. Well, welcome, Mark.
Hello.
Thank you
for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Well, take us back to the beginning. You were born in Manchester.
Yes, I was born in Manchester. I grew up in Manchester. So I was born in 1958, and I grew up in the 60s in Manchester, and 70s. Yeah.
Do you recall early on hearing music in the household?
Oh, I was from being a very small child, I was interested in music. My first record that I bought was Telstar by the Tornadoes in 1962.
That's come up a couple. Yeah.
Just before to school, like about a month before I went to school. And then when I got to school, I was the youngest kid in the class, and although the kids had no idea what I was talking about, when I told them I bought a record. No one it didn't resonate with anybody. Yeah, so
that's funny. That's come up a couple of times doing interviews. Telstar, yes.
Yeah, I mean, I was interested in space and stuff. As a little kid back then, it was the space race was the thing. Yuri Gagarin had just been to space, and it was like it was a big deal. Everyone wanted to be a spaceman. Everyone wanted to be an astronaut.
Right.
And this song actually. When I think about it today, with the viewpoint of today, I think that personally, I think that's like the first techno record, really, because it had all the things that techno records have. It's an instrumental, it's a dance record, it's emotional, and it's about space. Yeah.
Yes, and then the Joe Meek production on that, as well. Oh yeah, I mean,
so that's where my musical kind of like beginnings were with that set record, and then I was interested in this kind of like sort of like science fiction-y kind of sound as well. So when Doctor Who appeared for the first time on the television in 1963, and they had this like theme tune which was just made out of like synthetic sounds of Delia Derbyshire, this woman who worked for the BBC Radiophonic Workshop, and she created. There was no synthesizers back then. She created her own electronic instruments just to make this sound otherworldly. And as a child, all of us as kids, we were all kind of fascinated by this theme tune, that it was like unlike anything that you'd ever heard. It sounded completely alien. And it wasn't just alien to us as little kids, it was alien to every single person watching that TV show back in 1963. Had ever heard anything like it before.
Anything like that.
And it took about 5 years before people started to understand that there's a thing called a synthesizer there by then, and kind of like it was something which I was fascinated with as a child. Yeah.
Well, I talked to Bruce Woolley, the Camera Club, and he talked about, he's kind of revitalized the theremin, and talk about that instrument and how it was used in different movies, and sci-fi movies and things.
But also in early horror movies as well.
That's right. They had that eerie sound to it. Yeah.
Yeah, and it become very popular. I've seen quite a few performers performing with the theremin, because for example, like there's a new band here in Germany, and they're partially from Berlin and partially from Bremen, but they're called Twin Noir, and they have a theremin in in a few of their songs and stuff. It's a really interesting kind of instrument, versatile.
Yeah. Yes, it is. I like for people to bring those kind of older instruments back, into the conscience, public conscience.
Yeah.
Well, were either one of your parents musically inclined at all?
Absolutely not.
Okay, all right.
They knew how to buy a record, but they didn't know anything about how
they were fans. They were fans.
They were absolutely not in any way. I mean, that said, they never had that opportunity to even find out if they were really. My parents, they liked, they grew up in the 20s and 30s, and so they liked, my mother was a Frank Sinatra fan and stuff, and it's that kind of thing that they listened to big bands back then in their youth, but they never really had the opportunity to find out if they were musical or not, really, because there wasn't any sort of thing like that available to them as young people. They both came from quite poor families, I suppose, by today's standards, and my father ran away to sea at 14. He joined the Merchant Navy in 1935. He ran away to sea, and he was a seaman until we were born, me and my sister. And it was like, up until then, he hadn't had no real kind of like attention to for music, really. He wasn't interested. I mean, maybe he was interested, but it wasn't like it was not something he had on a ship all the time.
Right. I was going to say, they were busy, trying to raise a family.
Survive.
Yeah, exactly, and get by. Exactly. Well, what was the very first instrument you learned to play?
Oh, I'm still learning.
Okay.
Well, I wanted to have a violin when I was a little kid. That was the first instrument that I learned to play as a little child. I wanted to I'd listen to the records on the radio, and there were all these like sweeping strings, and my mother said it's a violin. I was like, well, what's that? I thought it was just one violin.
Yeah.
I to learn how to play violin. The thing is like where I came from in Manchester, there wasn't really so many possibilities even for us as little kids, and by some pure chance, my mother mentioned it in some kind of meeting when she was with meeting the teachers, that I was really interested in like this violin and they said, oh, we want to start a violin class, and so they got a few violins, and I got one, and I learned to play the violin as a little child. Not very well, but got basics of it, really. Yeah.
You got
it was only when I actually heard a lot of violin. Like we had 5 kids in the class, and when they all played together, and that sweeping sound of strings came, and then I realised it's not one violin; it's a lot of violins.
Yeah.
And I was interested in classical music as a little kid because there was loads of violins on the.
Yeah, that's right. like 1,000 violins, right? Like
kind of, yeah.
Like the band, yeah. I was just thinking.
Well, when I got to about sort of like 11 or 12, I wanted to play guitar. I wanted to kind of progress from the violin idea. So I've become a fan of Jimi Hendrix, and so it was like, I want to make music like him. How does he do that?
you were big.
But my parents couldn't afford an electric guitar. I ended up getting an acoustic guitar that didn't do anything like it.
It wasn't anything close to it. Did you take any lessons or just self-taught?
No. I had an elder cousin who showed me a few chords. He could play guitar really well. He showed me some chords.
Okay. All right.
Well, he had no patience at all for me. He was older than me, and he dragged me around record shops and things like that. But he hadn't really no real patience to kind of show me how to play guitar. I only really started to learn guitar properly when I was a late teenager, really. When I wanted to start a band, and I thought I have to go and do this properly.
Yeah, right. Well, can you remember the first single, one of the first singles or albums that you bought yourself?
Well, the first single I bought was Telstar.
Okay.
In 1962.
Yeah. How about the
album that I bought with my own money was Electric Ladyland.
Oh, okay. All right. There we go.
I bought it when I was 11. I just turned 11, and with some Christmas money and birthday money and doing odd jobs around where I lived for the old people, going shopping and stuff like that, I collected this money together, and I snuck off to Manchester. Into the city centre, and I went to the record shop that I always went to with my cousin, and I walked in with bag of coins.
Was
on
there,
the counter, and they went, "We know what you want."
was there
Only hear that record. Only hear
that,
that.
that was there a favorite record shop you would frequent?
Well, the only record shop that I actually knew at that point, because I was a little kid, was Rare Records in the John Dalton Street in Manchester. It's now like Italian restaurant these days, but it was back then. It was a record shop. Upstairs were classical, like classical records and jazz, and downstairs was progressive records and nothing. It was like they didn't want people. They didn't consider that serious music.
Right.
That was just kind of. It was relegated to the basement, and my male cousin would drag me down. He'd have to look after me on Saturdays, and so he'd drag me down to the record shop and shove me in what was like a telephone box, and I'd listen. And then he'd just choose a record for me. I didn't know what the hell I would listen to. So he'd just choose something that he thought was good, like Led Zeppelin record or Jimi Hendrix or something like that. And I'd just sit there for two sides and listen to the music.
And listen to it. That's nice. They had those listening stations, like you said. Yeah,
it was like a small box with a loudspeaker and a stool, and just sit there and just listen to the music, just wondering what was going to happen next. And some things I liked, some things I obviously didn't like. There was one album that I really didn't like called Juicy Lucy, which I thought, why have you put this on? I don't like it.
Yeah, I think I have that. I may have one of their albums. Yeah, Juicy Lucy. Yeah, interesting. One of the import stores here, the guy, I got to know him real well. He didn't have any listening stations, but he would play just about anything. Can you spin this a little bit or play a few tracks off of this? And he would play it for me. And that's how I got to learn, about a lot of bands, through that. And he had a big import section as well. So, yes. Yeah. Well, how about the first live show that you attended, that you went to? Can you remember that?
First live show was Roxy Music.
Oh, okay.
In 1992, I went to see Roxy Music perform. Just like as they've just released around that time, they just released the first album, Virginia Plain was their first single, and I desperately wanted to see Roxy Music, and I heard that they were playing at the Stone Ground in Manchester, and I was like, how do I get to this gig? I didn't have any money, I didn't have any possibility to buy a ticket. I didn't even know what I was doing, to be honest. I just thought I'd go there to the venue and just see if I could see the band, really. I didn't actually think I was actually going to the gig as such. I went in my school uniform to after school. I told my mum I'm going to my mate's house to listen to music. And then I went to this venue, and there were a few roadies kind of like getting some stuff, and I said, can I help? And they looked at me and went like, take that in and don't come up, kind of thing. And I just hung around in this place waiting for, the sound check from the band that were on before them, was this band, and I just thought it was just to get the singer tried to impersonate this Rolling Stones. I was completely disinterested in this band that were playing first. Yeah, I wasn't bothered at all. I just wanted to see. I actually just wanted to see Brian Eno play synthesizer, because he had all these beeps and synthesizer and stuff, and it looked really fascinating. And I kind of hung in the shadows there watching this. And the band they were on before were called the New York Dolls. I didn't know that until I actually played on the telly.
Is that right?
2 weeks later, that band that were on before.
Yeah.
But Roxy Music was really, I was really really eager to see them. And I never told anyone I'd been to this gig. I was
going to ask you. That was the big question. Did your mom ever find out?
No, I never told anybody. I was petrified that if I told even my sister that I'd been to secretly see this gig, she might, in some kind of moment of anger, tell my mother that I'd actually secretly snuck off and been to this gig. And I was like, I can't let that happen. I couldn't tell anybody, no one at school or anything. I just kept it secret for years until
it was your secret.
It was, I mean, it's equally the same as buying Electric Ladyland. I hid the record under my bed, or I hid the cover under my bed. I didn't want my mum to find that cover, and because I knew she'd throw it in the bin if she saw it. And cover of naked women on the cover. She was
right.
11 years old, me having this cover. It's disgusting. So that was a big secret as well, kept from everybody.
Well, what's interesting doing these interviews is the common threads I start seeing, the more of these that I do. Just yesterday, I talked to, I don't know if you'll know this name, Mike Demery. He was do you remember the Winkies?
Yeah,
Pub Rock,
I've heard of them. Yeah,
the
I
Pub
don't.
Rock, and then Tyler Gang. He was in the
Yeah,
Tyler.
yeah, I know Star.
Okay, with Sean Tyler. Well, they were with the Winkies. They were Brian Eno took an interest in them, and they became his backing band in '74. So this was a couple of years later. This was a couple of years
Yeah,
later. He had just finished his first album.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So I thought
No,
that's interesting. I just talked to this guy yesterday, and here's
yeah, yeah,
Brian Eno,
yeah.
coming with
Brian for me was like the main focus of the Roxy music was the fact that
yeah,
he was in the band and he was a bit like alien looking and stuff, but
right,
the actual kind of soundscapes that he created with his synthesizer was just really interesting, and to have that in a band like Roxy Music just kind of fascinated me somehow.
yeah.
I want to see it, I want to see
Right,
how he did it.
right.
Yeah.
You know what got me was their image was kind of flying in the face of you know tradition, because you got Brian, at that time he wasn't bald, he had the long hair, and then you had the really good looking Brian Ferry, and then you had Phil Manzanera, who's a hippie. I mean, he just looks with the beard and everything. So it was just kind of like they weren't trying to conform to any kind of image, and that kind
But
of
it
thing.
was the birth of glam rock at that
Yeah,
period. You had
yeah,
Roxy Music, you had David Bowie,
exactly. Yes.
who transformed himself from being some kind of hippie into like this, Ziggy Stardust character, which was also really super, super, super interesting at the same time.
Yeah.
And also, Iggy Pop as well with the Stooges. And I was following that kind of music. So it was like, Roxy Music they were British, they were new, they
Yeah.
were, it was a question of, I could go to see David Bowie, but I couldn't afford that, either. It was opportunity to see,
Yeah.
I didn't actually go to see the gig. I just went to
Right.
see if I could see him, and then I got in, and then I was there, and
And then
then
you were there.
and I was inside, and I was like, I'm not going out. I'm staying here, and nobody took any notice of me really, because I was a kid, in the school uniform. So I think that the people who worked there thought I might have belonged to somebody who worked in the club or whatever, and they just kind of I was invisible, apart from the predators in the club.
Right, right.
No one took any notice of me. I was just a kid there.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's a few years difference between us, but when I was in college, Roxy Music was really big. Down
Yeah.
the hall, these guys were playing it constantly, and they had the windows open, and so you walked out in the parking lot, you could hear it. So yeah, they were really big at that time. Well, how about the music scene developing around you as a teenager?
Oh well, I was into the more kind of darker, deeper kind of that uncommercial kind of music. I mean, like I like pop records as well. There was quite a lot of pop records I actually liked, but I was more interested in the more progressive sound of like, and the more abstract really things. By like 1972, listening to Brian Eno, listening to Roxy Music, and the fact that there was an introduction into like krautrock music from Faust, for example.
Yeah.
That was a free. It was a record that you could get for I think it was £1 if you had a New Musical Express voucher. And Virgin released that. They released like Tubular Bells and became quite popular.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so I was kind of interested more into that kind of sound. And like I thought, Faust, like German music. We didn't know anything about German music. We didn't even know Germans made bloody music. It was like they were Germans. So they back in 1972, they were still considered the enemy, and it was like what kind of the music that we only thought the Germans made was papa music, marching.
Yeah. Right. Right.
What German music was. Suddenly you've got this thing like Faust. It was kind of so completely different to anything. It was like nothing like that was available in the UK at all. No one was making music like that. Everyone made music, some kind of popularity, but Faust seemed to be kind of like the antithesis of that, So it was like really interesting to see, how it was like almost like a piece of classical music, this
Right.
avant-garde thing, and I became more and more intrigued by this music. It was really hard to find. It was really hard to get. I started working in a record shop around that period as well. When I was 14.
Yes.
Really, so I could get in to find things that were not available
Yes.
normal on the outside. And so for me it was like a journey, if you like, to find out if I could get any of these records from Germany that seemed to be very, very elusive and not available all the time, and managed a small collection. The early first Tangerine Dream albums.
Tangerine Dream, yes.
They were like Karl Schultz, these kind of things. They were the things that really fascinated me. Astra Temple, Manuel Göttingen and stuff. I was like, this is German music. It's not a 2.5 minute song. It's like, pieces of music and thought out, and I was kind of like, I like the instrumental thing, I was an instrumental fan. Being weaned on classical music and this kind of thing, so I was fascinated by that, and it kind of like gripped me, and I was always constantly thinking like, well, I wonder what they have that I don't know.
Right. Yeah. Kraftwerk, and The Model was the first track I ever heard from Kraftwerk.
Well, I was lucky. I got to hear the others before, like the more experimental kind of like almost jazz records that they released before they released Autobahn.
Right.
The first like 3 or 4 like Kraftwerk-ish records. I mean, there was Tone Float, and then there was Ralph and Florian, and then they released the 2 records as Kraftwerk, and they were kind of like very experimental, kind of electronic-y, sort of jazzy things, really.
Yes.
Experiments, and then along came like Autobahn,
right?
And like, wow, that is really something different. Yeah, it was a pop song made on synthesizers. It was something really special, and after that, I was hooked.
Right. And I like Radioactivity too. The track as well. Yeah, Radioactivity. I always enjoyed that one. Yeah, and some of like you said, some of the earlier krautrock, too, as well. Really. Well, how do you pronounce that? New.
Look for Amondul or
Yes, exactly. Yes. And is NEU, is it just new? Is it pronounced new or now?
Noi.
Noi. See, I had to ask you about that Noi. See, that's another one.
Yeah. Noi as well, yeah.
Yes.
Really hard to find Noi records back then.
Right, exactly. Well, I've been lucky enough to find some of those more recently, as well.
Yeah, they released them, and they've done a very good job on the re-releases, I must say. They sound really good. Yeah.
Right. Well, went along. I want to have it in the right time slot here. Did you move to Berlin? Was this prior to Die Unbekannten?
Oh yeah. I only went to Berlin to buy some records. I just came to visit Berlin.
Okay.
I'd been to Germany before a couple of times, like 3 or 4 times before. I got a passport in like 76, and I went a few times to Germany, West Germany, but Berlin was so far away. It was like in the middle of like East Germany. It was really hard to get to. And I was hitchhiking around Germany, West Germany, back in the 70s. So no cars were going through East Germany to Berlin. Nobody went there, really.
Yeah, right.
Only kind of like people who wanted to escape from the German army went to Berlin.
Yeah.
And if you were a student studying in Berlin, because of that fact that studying in Berlin, you were exempt from the German army. It was very hard to find people who were actually going there. They'd just be going to cities in West Germany. So it was a difficult ride to try and get there. And eventually in 1978, I just, by pure chance, I went to Hamburg, and it was quite close, and I thought I'll catch a train, and I missed the train, and I ended up hitchhiking, and the train guard on the platform told me, well, if you missed the train, but if you go to the border, you can just hitchhike from the border. And I realized that was the best solution, and that's what I ended up doing, and I hitchhiked to Berlin. And when I got there, I realized it was nothing like the rest of Germany. It was nothing like West Germany. Yeah. And it had a wall around it, and you had another part of the city that was unknown to everybody. And I became, fascinated by what it had. And I really went to Berlin because I thought there's going to be, like, if no one goes there, there's obviously going to be a load of record shops that have records that nobody buys, because if nobody goes there, they'll be right. I might find some gems and some rare things,
Wow.
I did as well.
Yeah, it was like your own record shop, you know.
It was
Exactly.
it was quite a fascinating journey, trawling the second hand shops and the junk shops which were here in abundance, and finding like obscure Italian Morricone soundtracks and stuff like that. It was like it was really interesting, yeah. And then I
Yeah.
had, they discovered there was another part of town which nobody knew anything about, which is East Berlin, and I went there very often, and yeah, it was like a completely different world, and just the fascination of that just kind of like I just stayed, I was just like intrigued by it all, and then I ended up like finding what was the fledgling sort of avant-garde scene of Berlin was just starting to emerge as I got here, um, and then I ended up being part of that, and then and through that, they like one guy, he was putting on a gig and he said, like, you've got a guitar. Do you want to I need someone to fill in. We've got a concert coming up, and he'd already made the posters and put all these band names on the posters of bands that he just made it up, so it looked like there was a bill, and he was asking people if they play and become that band for that one moment. And I was like, yeah, I'll do it, not realizing what it meant, and I ended up playing at this gig, and we didn't have a name. We just played. We did 3 songs and that was it. And then we got off stage and this girl came running up to us, who we knew. She had a record label, Monogam Records. And she came running up, she goes, oh, that was fantastic. I want to make a record with you. And then after that, the write-up in the newspaper after our gig was like 2 unknown Englishmen who'd performed. And then we became the unknown. The Unbekannten. We were just known as the Unbekannten. So we automatically decided, okay, we'll call our record that and our band that, and that's what we were, the Unbekannten.
Well, it was apropos, that's for sure. Yeah, definitely the name itself. Well, okay. Well, who else was just the 2 of you, or who else was in the band?
Thomas Wiedler, who was a drummer from Switzerland who had kind of washed up also in West Berlin. He was actually the boyfriend at that time of Elisabeth Recker, who ran a small record label called Monogam Records, and she'd released the first Mania D record with Gudrun Gut and Beate Bartel and Bettina Köster, and she released P1E, P1E synthesizer record by Michael Schleimer, which was very interesting, and Einstürzen Neubauten. And
oh yes,
she was like, I want to release your record, and we were like, but we're nothing like any of the bands that you've just released. And Thomas was looking for a band. He'd played with Mutterfreuden, a Swiss band at that point, and he'd left the band and come to Berlin, and he was looking around for something to do, really. And we asked him if he wanted to play drums in our band, and so he played drums in our band, and he played drums in Die Gesunden, the Healthy, and another band called Die Haut. Yeah, it was kind of like he was a bit of a sessions musician, but he was like we were his kind of first band, and then because everyone saw him, then what he could do, do you want to play on our record? Do you want to play on our record? And then he eventually ended up being Nick Cave's drummer.
Oh, that's right. He was. Yes. I remember the track Jugend from Einstürzen Neubauten. Yeah. See, you have to. It's weird. I'm half German on my mother's side, but of course that was several generations ago that they came over here. So, but I'm not the best at translating or speaking in German. Well, let me ask you: Are you fluent? Are you pretty fluent?
Ziemlich.
Okay, you can get by, huh?
Yeah. I can't. After 45 years plus of being in Germany, if I didn't speak German, I'd be very embarrassed.
Okay, that's right. Well, the thing is, though, English being the universal language,
now
I imagine that there are enough people around you that speak English, right? Where you live? Most people. Yeah.
Even then, like every German, West German, learned English in school.
In school.
East Germans, on the other hand, they learned Russian.
Right.
Language. They didn't learn
English. Being communist, of course,
part of the Soviet sphere, of course, they're not going to learn the language of the enemy.
They wouldn't let them, and they would avoid that.
It was very difficult to communicate with East Germans if you didn't speak Russian or German, and that was like determined to be able to communicate with these people. And I thought, if I'm going to live in here in Germany, I don't want to, you know, that every German, every opportunity would try and speak English with me, and I'd say,
Yes,
I want to talk to you if you're going to speak to me in English. I want to learn German, so I wanted to understand Germans. I wanted to understand how Germans tick. You know, like we were always told Germans don't have a sense of humor, but I discovered that they do, and it's a very different kind of like sort of humor, but it's a very specific German kind of humor, and I was intrigued, and then I also wanted to have a communication with East Germans as well and be able to talk to them. So I was determined to learn German, so I did. Yeah, I didn't go to school. I just learned, like learning how to play guitar, learning by doing. There wasn't so many things available to us actually. You know, there weren't you know, these like schools where you could learn German back in 1970s and early 80s. This all came much later, and of course, you know, like today we say, yeah, English is the universal language. Back then in the 70s and 80s, it wasn't. Yeah, the language was French. Most people spoke French and Spanish than they did English, and it's only through the internet that English has become the universal language.
Yes, that's very true. I took Spanish a couple of years in junior high, and I could probably get by if I went to Mexico or Spain. You know, probably.
Yeah,
but I would rely heavily on those to speak English. Meet me halfway. Well, the band, here we go again. Unbekannten did release a couple of albums, one in '81 and '82.
Singles, 2 EPs, really. Two
Okay.
EPs.
Oh, okay, EPs. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, in '81 and '82. And at the same time, you were simultaneously working as co-manager and sound engineer for the all-girl group Malaria.
Yeah. I mean, well, I'd met Gudrun in the record shop here, and we became pals. And you know, they had this band. It was a new band. You know, she just started this band, and they needed someone to do the sound, and I became their sound engineer and their kind of like face, really. You know, like because back then girls had it really rough in the music business. They weren't taken seriously. People just like, you know, they were just girls, you know, and they couldn't play their instruments. So they'd all make all these excuses up, and I thought it was great that they broke all the rules of rock and roll. They didn't give a fuck. You know, they were doing it what they wanted. Gudrun, Gudrun wasn't really a drummer. She played piano, I think it was, or something. But she wanted to be the drummer. You know, they all kind of like made it up as they went along. And I thought that was really refreshing kind of approach to making music. It was like, let's do something that we don't know if we can do it or not. And I wanted to help support that, and also being as a female band in this male-dominated music world, it was really hard for them to kind of get any kind of like gigs or anything like this. And so having a man as a manager, it was much easier for these guys to approach, you know, because they didn't have to approach the girls, you know. So they could approach me, you know, and so I was there. I only did the girls' bidding, whatever they wanted, really, and whatever they requested. So I was the face, I was the facade, I was the thing that they could approach, and then I did the sound, and then eventually we had another guy called Jochen Huder who was. He just started a kind of an agency. He wanted to have a band, and he thought the girls were great as well, and so we did that as a co-management thing. I did the tours, I did all the gigs, and you know, and I actually got Malaria their album deal was like Disque de Crépuscule back in
yes.
Yeah, I got that because Annie was my girlfriend at the time. So it was like she had this label called Disque de Crépuscule, and I talked her into like releasing Malaria's record, and
yes.
well, she thought they were good out as well. It wasn't like I didn't have to do too much convincing. I just gave her
right. Do I have this? Yes, here we go. Yeah, here we go. I'll hold this up.
Oh yeah, you got a Crepuscule compilation. It's a very nice compilation, that actually, original.
Yes, it was. And this is where I first actually Durutti Column was the first time that I ran across them on here.
Yeah.
Vinnie Riley, yes. And they had an Orange Juice on here.
Well, I mean, some really good tracks on that compilation. It's a really album, yeah.
So I keep on with all of my vinyl.
Period of like, you know, like just experimentation and seeing how far we could go. Really.
Yes.
And the Malaria, when they did their album, then it really gave people. I mean, if you listen to the first Malaria album, or the only Malaria album, really, it was that Emotion. It's like it's really stood the test of time. The album. It's like you listen to it today, and it could have been made yesterday. You know.
Yes. That's the kind of music that I like. That does travel. It travels well. Well, the band would morph into Shark Vegas.
Our band. Yeah. Well, we got Bernard Sumner, the singer of New Order.
Yeah.
He asked me if I would be interested in being their support act on the European tour after they released Blue Monday. They got quite a few gigs offers around from Europe, and so they asked me Western Europe, yeah. And they said, would you like to be our support act? And I was thinking, I do, but people aren't going to be able to pronounce our name like you pronounce it.
Like me.
I was like, that's how it's going to be. And I thought we have to change our name to something that people that's a little bit more accessible or easier to speak, and also means not so much. Doesn't how something a bit ambiguous, and not so direct. Because I wanted to change our musical style as well from Die Unbekannten being kind of like depre disco. We wanted it to be a bit more kind of electronic and a bit more kind of like clubby or whatever somehow. And so I thought it'd be best if we just changed our name, made it something ambiguous, and then we can do whatever we like. Then we're not confined to doing one kind of thing. And so we changed the name.
Is there a meaning behind the name, or was it just?
No, I was just thinking of words, and it just came up. It was just I was doing the David Bowie cut up lyrics.
Oh, right.
Just throwing the words, words that I liked, words that kind of meant something. And Vegas just happened to come up for some reason in this kind of like collage of words, and it was just two words. I was like, oh, that sounds interesting. What could it mean? It means nothing.
Right.
And that's how we became Shark Vegas.
Okay. Yeah. Well, the single "You Hurt Me" was released on Factory, and as mentioned in the intro, and you just referred to Bernard again. He was involved in the production of the track. Talk about the difficulty. Talk about the difficulties that you ran into recording.
He liked our demo. It was when we performed with Die Unbekannten, and we had our first version of You Hurt Me with Die Unbekannten, and he liked that demo. And then when we were on the tour and we played the song on tour, he was like, we've got some days off. We should book studio. So we booked Connie Plank's studio. And we're thinking, wow, great, Connie Plank's
right.
And we're all kind of secretly hoping that Connie Plank might come in and spring
right
our record.
Yeah.
And we get to the studio, and the engineer of the studio, another English guy called Dave Hutchins, he had a slipped disc, and he was in absolute agony the whole time, and he was screaming in agony. And he got this like camp bed thing in front of the mixing desk that he was lying on, shouting instructions to Bernard, who was trying to make this record, and it was a complete utter fucking disaster. It was terrible what we came out with. Connie Plank popped his head in once and said, "Does anyone want any salad?" And that was the last time we saw him.
You saw him.
It was like fucking hell,
I don't mean to laugh at his pain, but I mean, with time, it's humorous. Yeah. Not at the time.
He was man. Was it? The single didn't manifest itself at that point. It was kind of like just like our demo sounded better than this thing that we made in Connie Plank Studio. So we took the tapes and we went back to Manchester after the tour, and went to Strawberry Studios and finished it there. And then Bernard was like a little bit more kind of comfortable in that environment because he'd been there before.
Right.
So it was a little bit easier to put together. Yeah.
Well, you may have seen my recent interview with Ben Cassidy of Section 25.
Oh yeah, with Ben.
Of course, he produced the album From the Hip. We talked a little bit about that, but I wanted to show you. I still have this. There we go.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
right.
I still have it. I keep everything that I can't find on CD. I hang on to the vinyl. And then here's the backside of it. Yeah, if that's visible.
Well, that's Bernard being funny.
Yes.
Bernard being funny wrote after what we've been through, yeah.
Uh-huh.
With the record. You know, you
Right.
hurt me with your flesh
Yeah.
lies in hell.
Yes, exactly.
That's not the title of the record. That's
That
just
wasn't here. Exactly. Yeah, but I wanted to tell you my history with this. I went to San Antonio to DJ. I had an offer to DJ at a club down there, a dance club in '86. So a couple of years after this. And I befriended one of the locals there that frequented the club, and he was kind of turning me on. I mean, I took with me all of the stuff that I knew was popular here, and most of it was popular there too. But he said, "Here's a few hints, of some tracks that the guys, the club goers, really like, really enjoy. So you might look into, picking these up." And this was one of them.
Oh, really?
Yes, and
No idea. It was like it become kind of like a popular. Like I get a lot of people from the US saying that how this song kind of like they played it in the club, and I'm like, well, why did we never find out about this? No one told
you
us.
didn't.
We did actually play in America once. We played at the Danceteria in New York.
Yeah.
In 1984, and we were featured in a couple of like local, I think they were local music magazines or whatever, because we'd done this gig. But that was it. It's not like we were invited back. We thought we must have been really shit if we're not getting it back. But our record did seem to do, seem to resonate really with a lot of people in America for some reason.
It was popular. It would get them out on the dance floor. And here's another one that's. Do you remember this, or do you recognize that? Succession.
I can't see what that is.
Here it's touch. Here we go at the bottom of it. Yeah, touch.
Yeah.
I just talked to Charlie Kelly or Charles Kelly, Scottish band.
Oh.
And this was another one I picked up at the same time I was down there, at a record store, Touch, and that one also was very popular as well.
Yeah.
Out there. So yeah, I just talked to him. So there again. Well, talk a little bit about the Alien Nation project.
Well, Alien Nation kind of was born out of Shark Vegas, if you like. It was like what happened was Alistair, our singer of Shark Vegas, he decided to go back to the UK and go and live in the UK. And I was like, oh, well, what am I going to do now? I don't want to do Shark 2 or something.
Yeah, right.
It's kind of like, and I was kind of getting more into the more electronic, even more electronic kind of club thing. And so I wanted to experiment a little bit with that and see what I could do with Alien Nation. I didn't really intend on releasing any records, to be honest. It was like friends of mine were like adamant about releasing it as a record, and I was like, well, if you think you're going to sell it, you can release it. It's your problem if you don't, So I wasn't really kind of like obsessed with doing something with Alien Nation. I just did it, and then later on, we wrote, for example, this one song called "Lovers of the World." We wrote that as Shark Vegas initially, me and Alistair, but we never recorded it. We only recorded a demo in our practice room, not even in the studio. And it kind of like lay on the shelf for years. And then at some point in the late like 89 or so, I had an attempt at trying to record it in the studio. It became something else, which it wasn't supposed to be, because I kind of lost the plot somehow, wanting to produce it and whatever. And it became something else. And then I just kind of like gave up on that. And so didn't really think anything about it until I actually came to do MFS, my record label. And this record label was born out of the remnants of the former Amiga, the East German record label. Yeah. And the one of the A&Rs there who heard this demo, he insisted that I release this record on my record label. I was quite reluctant to do so, to be honest, because I thought I don't really want to just release my own records on my own record label. I want to have a record label for other people. Yeah. But he said, if you don't do it, you're not doing it. So I was kind of like, okay, then I have to do it. And I kind of I just did it and just let it kind of like, I didn't do any promotion of any kind whatsoever on it. And that was one project which for me, it was just a project, just an interlude, if you like. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, fast forward to 10 forward, a single and an EP in 96 and 97.
The
Yeah.
10 forward I made with a guy called Patrick Enzer and Chris Sippel, both of who were involved in the club scene back then, and we had this idea that we wanted to make a track with loads of 303 in it and a bit kind of like science fiction-y or whatever. And so 10 forward is the bridge of Star Trek, and
that's right.
And we wanted to kind of like do something which had this kind of like feeling. We were fans of the X-Files and stuff like that, so we wanted to have this kind of feeling, this kind of mysterious sci-fi thing. And one of these 50s science fiction films thing, it's called in German it's called Metaluna for Antwortet nicht, but I can't remember the title in English at the moment. It was like a really early science fiction film, and there was a like a narration from the aliens who speak in this film. And I thought, oh, that's a great quote. So I kind of sampled the quote and we put that together. 10 forward. We only did like 3 or 4 songs together. Yeah. Okay. And Chris Zippel, he became he's a producer and makes his own music, and he released quite a few nice albums himself. He produced the Pet Shop Boys, one of the Pet Shop Boys albums and stuff later on in his career. But he's still around, Chris, doing music. Yeah.
Okay, still around. Okay, now Reefa Madness.
Reefa Madness. Reefa Madness was a track that we did for B Movie. I was by this point we're talking around like 2008 or so. Yeah, I started working with Misha Adam, who used to be he worked for me in my label for a brief period, doing compilations and stuff, and doing the licenses for compilations. And Misha he had his own project, in like techno project, and he had a little studio. And I said, well, let's work together. We did the soundtrack for a theatre piece called Captain Berlin versus Hitler, and it was from Jörg Buckereit had put on this play, and I did the live sound effects for the live Foley for this theatre piece, and then we did some of the music for it. And so I was in the studio with Misha, and then we decided to do some other things, and we started making remixes and stuff. And when we came to do the soundtrack for B Movie, there was a scene in B Movie that depicts the Virgin Record shop that I worked in the 70s in Manchester. In this scene, these kids sitting. We didn't have like sound booths where people could listen to music. We had like a bench with like these headphones in these headrests, which people.
Yes. We had those.
It was like self-made and really crap. and if someone was listening to music next to you really loud, you could hear what they were listening
to. That's right.
So we had this kind of like collage of music, and one of the songs in this collage of music was this one guy listening to reggae, and there was a guy listening to punk, there was a guy listening to rock. So there were all these different things, and Reefa Madness was just born out of that. Really, it was about it was like it was a reggae track, because in the 70s, we were all kind of fascinated by this sound of music, which had kind of infiltrated from Jamaica, with the workers who'd come from Jamaica in the 60s and early 70s and stuff. And so our record shop, we didn't sell that many reggae records. We always got a small selection, but we always had these black guys from Moss Side coming in asking us for records that were, had toasting on them. And we're like, what's toasting? He goes, yeah, it's toasting, which was rap. Yeah, it was early rap, so it was like reggae records with rap mixed together, and they were super rare, super interesting. And so when we came to do B Movie and do the soundtrack for B Movie, I wanted that also to be representative as part of my, as part of my musical like initiation, if you like, being initiated with reggae as much as I was with punk rock. It was like they went hand in hand. The initial kind of like image of like punk rock in 1976 and early 77 was, wearing a swastika armband. I'm like, that's a really bad idea. But the kids wore that because they wanted to provoke their parents, because they said to you fought in the war, and what we got from it, we got unemployment and we've got no prospects for our future. Germans won the fucking war, and so they kind of like used that as a kind of indicator to that. I mean, we thought it was a bad idea, and then eventually, as more right wing kind of like characters kind of started to embrace punk rock, it was like, well, we need to kind of change that somehow, and so the scene started to bring more like reggae bands on as support acts for punk bands, from punk concerts. And so you had a mixture of punks and reggae fans, and you even had punk rock bands making reggae records. Like there was a Wild dub, for example, by Generation X, which was like a dub reggae version of Generation X track, or you had the Ruts. The Ruts did a whole album like that, so it was like this.
You're right. There was a whole lot of bands that started doing dub versions.
Yeah. It was something that it was also an experiment as well. It was also interesting to be able to see what you could do with your track, and and then and so Reefer Madness was kind of like a presentation, if you like, of that.
That
it was fun to make it. Actually, I really enjoyed doing it.
The reggae and the ska movement in the UK. And all of that, and before that, I guess it was rock steady, right? That's another kind of branch of that. The whole calypso, stemming from the islands and all that. Well, go ahead and elaborate a little bit more on the soundtrack, Lust and Sound in West Berlin.
Yeah, well, the documentary film, B movie we started work on that around about 2013 or so, actually. By 2014, we'd already been working. Oh no, it was even earlier than that. But when it came out in 2015, we'd already worked like 4 years on the project by that point.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it takes a long time to put a film together. Longer than you think, and to get in all the, because it's not all my footage that's in this film. We have 70 cinematographers, really. Every single snippet is somebody else made that. We put it all together. All Super 8 footage and VHS footage and
having to coordinate all that. That does take time.
Fine. Well, I had a narrative, my story. It was it's a vision of West Berlin in the 80s as told through my eyes, really, and the things that I experienced and stuff. It's like a bit of a greatest hits of things that I experienced, because the film would have been 40 years long if it had been,
right.
But it's like I try to tell the story of what West Berlin's alternative scene was like, as opposed to West Berlin's pop music scene as well, because you needed both.
Exactly.
You needed your Nena and Die Ärzte as much as you needed Einstürzen und Neubauten and Malaria, because one without the other wouldn't really kind of mean anything, And the fun fact is that we all got on with each other. We knew the people from Nena and Die Ärzte. Knew them, and they were part of our kind. Even though they made a totally different kind of music, to Neubau.
Where is Exmal Deutschland? Where are they from?
Well, they were from Hamburg.
Okay, Hamburg. Okay.
They weren't in our Berlin scene. Right. And Die Unbekannten and Shark Vegas and whatever incarnation of whatever it was that I did kind of fell in the middle, really, because we weren't super avant-garde and we weren't super pop.
Yeah.
We were in the middle.
Well, that was exactly. But that was a niche that you tapped into, like you said. We're talking about a lot of the more popular. Had their light, this light shined on them or shone on them, but you were going in for a different, market there. What was the reaction when it came out, as far as like the public and the critics? And
you mean B movie?
Yeah.
They were quite amazed, actually, because no one had really gave it any thought up until that point. And the idea was actually born from my next door neighbor, Heiko Langer, who was he was too young to understand what that scene was like. He was like 5 when it was around, so he didn't really know it. Really, he'd only heard about it, and he's got young kids of his own, and he was thinking, how am I going to express what it was like back then in this period to my kids? Because there's no visual kind of representation of any kind. And then it became the film. And I became part of that film. I started initially as the restorer of the soundtrack for the music for the film, and then I thought, well, if you're looking for scenes out of this period, I've got a few things there on that they might be interested in. So I gave them some footage and stuff and some programs that I'd made, and suddenly I became then, can you tell us? They realized that while they were going through all this footage that they had from other people, I kept appearing in this footage, and so they asked me if I tell my story, and so that's what the movie became, my story of West Berlin as seen through my eyes.
Yes.
Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. It does make sense. Yes.
Yeah.
Wow. So you said about 4 years in the making. Wow, that's There's
a lot of choices made. Like this piece of footage, this piece of. There's some fascinating things which I would have loved to have kept it in, but because of the flow of the narrative of the film and everything, you have to like make decisions which kind of like compromise certain things. But it's become very, very. The film is not available outside of Germany officially. It's we only have the rights for the music for Germany, and that's why you can't see it outside of Germany unless I travel with the film and show it. Yeah, it's unavailable. It's not available on Netflix. It's not available on outside of Germany on Apple TV.
right.
So it makes it kind of elusive and very kind of like desired because of
I was going to say,
readily available everywhere, which is very nice.
Well, it is. It's a nice marketing ploy, I think, in a way. If you think.
Well, if it would have been a successful one, it's not like anyone's. We never made any money on this movie. Yeah.
Right.
We weren't able to sell it anywhere. It's not like we go in the cinema outside of Germany.
Right.
So it's not like I did a tour in the beginning when it started. We did a cinema tour, and that was it. Then there was no other way of making any kind of recouping any cash or any kind.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's become this very important piece of like history, really, that's being covered by the film. That people don't really know about West Berlin, because when the wall came down, West Berlin ceased to exist.
Yeah,
it was over, and no one knew really what had gone on there, because our Berlin little scene as it was a really little scene. We were a handful of people,
right.
And everybody made music with everybody else in a sense, right? And did things together. We all kind of chipped in somehow. So it was a very small scene, this kind of music avant-garde scene of West Berlin.
Right.
When the wall came down, everyone from the West wanted to see what was going on in the East. There was not necessarily the music scene, but just go and look at the place because they'd never been there. And all the Easter kids who'd been like listening to West German radio for the past 40 years, suddenly were like desperate to go to a West German record shop and West Berlin record shop and buy the records that they always wanted to buy, whether it be Frank Zappa or Pink Floyd or King Crimson or something like this. They were kind of like that. They were into that. So, and also that's how the birth of the techno scene actually happened, because in reality, the techno scene of West Berlin in 1989 was just like 80 people, if it was that, or maybe 100 people, without the fall of the Berlin Wall, it probably would have just remained that. The kids in the East, they'd all heard this music on the radio and thought there was a massive techno scene happening in West Berlin. So when the wall came down, they all came flooding over the border and wanted a techno club, and there was nothing. This one club called the Info.
I find it fascinating. I've talked to a few older musicians who played, in Eastern Europe, under the communist regime. And they said, how oppressed they were. And they even had like military, guards there at the concert and things like that with actual guns and things like that. So it didn't get out of hand. But once, like you said, the wall coming down and then just the opening up, these people were so oppressed. They were hungry, like you said, for Western music and just hungry for the things that they hadn't been exposed to,
They all knew, the music. They knew the bands. They knew things about the bands that I was surprised that they even. Where did you get the information from? There's no periodicals. There's no music, newspapers of any kind. That they were just listening to medium wave radio and they'd get information from there. They knew about Led Zeppelin and about Pink Floyd and Frank Zappa, and the more forbidden that these artists were, the more intrigued they were.
The more intrigued they exactly.
So the more fascination was about this music. You know, everyone that I met in Czechoslovakia and Hungary and East Germany, they all had their, you know, Pink Floyd, Jimi Hendrix, you know, all these things, all these things from my youth. I could talk to them on this level because they were from my youth. I knew about heavy rock music from the 70s and stuff. I also knew about, you know, punk rock because I'd worked in Virgin Records in Manchester as punk rock started. So I'd been there from the very, very beginning. And these Eastie kids wanted to know this information. I smuggled cassettes into East Germany with my music, the music that they wanted to hear, and put all kinds of things on there that they didn't know, you know, just sort of broaden their musical horizons, but at the same time show them that things that seemingly are impossible can actually happen, you know. And to do this, I played a secret gig in Czechoslovakia in 1982. That was the very first time that a Western band had illegally performed in Czechoslovakia. You'd had something like Boney M on their TV, you know, but that was like state-run television, you know. And that was kind of like that wasn't the same thing as being in a band, Die Unbekannten, and secretly playing a secret gig in Czechoslovakia. That really kind of resonated with the Czechs. This underground scene there, because no one had ever dared to do it before. I thought, you know, bands would probably come there all the time and do this. only when I did it, then I realized that no one had ever dared to do it before. But I was kind of like, okay, if I can do it there, I can do it in the East as well, in East Berlin. But it was far more difficult to get it organized there. You know, things like guitars, electric guitars, electric bass, drums. These things weren't readily available to buy in a shop in Eastern Europe. You know, you couldn't just go to a shop and just buy a guitar and a bass and start a band. It just didn't happen. You needed permission. You needed to have to prove your proficiency on your instrument, and they go through your lyrics to see what kind of lyrics you wrote, what kind of music you're going to make. Did it conform to the ideals of the farmer? It was really hard. And even if you did get a guitar, you know, it's finding an amplifier, getting the parts, a cable to plug your guitar in and stuff like that. All these things were unavailable. You could get it through ways and means. Somebody's like grannies go, like if you were a pensioner, you had free passage into. You could just go over the border, east and west, didn't matter because you were a pensioner. The East Germans hoped that East German pensioners would go and live in West Berlin. You know, that's what their expectation was. But they come back and forth, and the grannies would smuggle things into East Berlin. You know, they'd smuggle cables and foot pedals, strings and stuff like that.
They would find out anyway, regardless of the oppression. And you know, relating that to today, the Streisand effect, don't talk about it. Don't talk about it. The more people say that, the more people are going to talk about it. The Epstein files. You know, it's the same kind of thing related to back then with the communist regime, you know, trying to oppress that and push it down, you know, to where you're not going to hear any Western music. Well, that just made them want it more, like you said.
You want to know more. If they just don't everything, just explain everything first off.
So for Trump to say there's nothing here, you know, stop talking about it. It just fuels that. It just fuels that fire. It's not working. It's not working.
If it was a marketing ploy, it'd have worked very successfully. But fortunately, it's not. So he's got to deal with the situation.
We won't go down that hole. But yeah, it's talk a little bit about some of the remixing that you've done. I wanted to mention the ones that you sent me, the clips, the files, Underpass, you know, and I know I sent you this. This is where I first heard it, and I'll hold this up again. Machines.
Yes, yeah. I don't know this compilation, actually. I've never seen it before.
Oh, you hadn't seen this one? Yeah. It has Two Boy Army, Down in the Park, Silicon Teens, OMD, Human League, Being Boiled, one of my favorites, Thomas Lear.
And when is it?
When was it released?
Yeah.
Or what label? It was released. It's on Virgin 1980. So yeah, Underpass. And then that really intrigued me when you Bad Gadget is on here. Pill, and Gary Newman again, XTC, and Carol Fialka, who I interviewed. Carol Fialka. I talked to him. So Yeah, so that was one of my. That's how I found out about so many bands too. It's through those various artist compilations. And well,
Yeah, I mean, especially something like that, which is quite a, it's quite a pretty good overview of that particular sort of scene back then, as it was just emerging.
right,
The electronic music scene back in like
electronic pop. Yes, yes,
brand right,
right.
and it was nipped in the bud by greed, by wanting to like in America, for example, like the British invasion of another invasion of electronic music needed to be kind of like contained somehow. So in the thought that some guys were standing on stage playing synthesizer was not attractive to rock audiences, and so they had to bring in more kind of like the rock element, and it kind of petered out somehow. Kind of what was nipped in the bud. It didn't the electronic scene of like the early '80s didn't really get its opportunities really to expand and become whatever it could have been. That was kind of it was kind of like strangled before it had the chance to sort of get anywhere really. But we had a few kind of glimmers, like with John Fox Underpass and
Yes,
Army and stuff. Gary Newman right now, he's living the life that he'd always kind of like envisaged, I imagine, like how his kind of music would be received back then, and I think that's really nice that there's quite a few of these bands like OMD or Human League who they've had their major hits, and they had their kind of like the gap, if you like, in between.
yes.
But now they're kind of like having a renaissance, and the music's resonating with a totally different kind of audience. I mean, New Order the same really as well. Like their audience is kind of like huge now, and so even up to say maybe like early 20s or earlier, like say for example 2000 or something like this. Their audience was maybe like around about 2,000 or 3,000 people, but now they're playing in 80,000.
Like arena rock. Yeah, exactly. But I wanted to say a nice remix of Underpass.
Thank you.
I like the original, but I always thought it was a little primitive and needed updating. And you did the job. I think you did the job.
John was releasing a compilation of like works from like about in the like the what was it, but 2011 or 2010 or something like this. He was releasing a compilation of his works, and he asked me if I would be interested in doing a remix for this track, and I was like, whoa, no, there's no way that I can better this track. How am I supposed to make a remix? If I make a really terrible remix, the fans of Underpass will hang me, and I realized like no one had ever done it before. He'd never allowed anyone to do a remix before of this track, even though it had loads of people asking, "Can I do a remix? Can I do a remix?" He'd never allowed anyone to do it, and here he is asking me if I would do it.
Yeah.
And so I thought I have to make it so that it won't disappoint the fans. It's got to be a remix that I would want if I was going to listen to a remix of John Fox's Underpass, and that's what I try to create. Yeah.
Right. Well, I think it comes across real well in that. I have to be honest with you. I like the Midger Ultravox era better than the John Fox, the early ones.
Two totally different kind of sounds.
They are totally different, but I still prefer Midge. But I know a lot of fans, hardcore fans, they like the John Fox era. But I like John Fox's solo material. I really enjoy his solo.
Yeah, and Metamatic was like wow record really for me. It was like it said everything that I'd always wanted and dreamt about really at that moment. Yes. Coming because I actually the first time I heard Underpass, I was actually in the van with Joy Division going back to Manchester after they'd played their one and only gig in Berlin, the Count Kino in 1980. And they'd convinced me to go back to Manchester with them. Yeah. So we're sitting in the van and we're driving towards the border between West Berlin and East Germany. And we're almost nearing this kind of the border area. You could see it all lit up and everything. And as we drive there, we've got the radio on in the van. And suddenly, and when everyone's pretty quiet, it's late at night, it's like nighttime, like getting about like 11 o'clock midnight. And suddenly this song comes on the radio, and it had only been released like about a week before. or a few days before even, you know. But the sound came on the radio, and everyone just sat in silence, completely gobsmacked at this music, which just was the soundtrack to the thing that was opposite, right in front of us. This border, East German border, with the lights and all this kind of like barbed wire and what was called Stalin's carpet, which was like a metal mesh with spikes on it, which was on the inside of the East German side of the wall. That if anyone was trying to jump over, they'd land on these spikes. It was kind of like this, and you had border guards with machine guns, and this kind of like really mystical kind of sound was coming out of the loudspeakers in the van. And it was like, what is that?
Right.
And I was immediately went, you know, and bought the record when I got back to England.
Yes.
The first thing I looked for was, what was that record?
Exactly. Oh, I know. That would be surreal. That That kind of. Well, yeah. But, you know, well, Ultravox has their connection, you know, with Connie Plank, and then and I like the Herr X, Mr. X, but of course they did the German, you know, version, and so they had their leanings there as well, you know. But as far as like another track here, Sweetest Perfection, uh, your Sweetest Conception remix. I have to say, when I listened to Violator back in 1990, I passed on that track, the original. I like, you know, Enjoy the Silence, of course, you know. I love the lyrics to that anyway. It's so true. But I like what you've done with it. You know, it had me my ears perking up when I heard your remix on this one. Yeah.
Thanks. Well, that was a very difficult mix actually to do.
Oh, was it?
First of all, well, I was asked, the Depeche Mode were releasing some kind of remixes CD box set thing, right? And they wanted people to do remixes, and I was asked if I would do a remix, and I was given a list of remixes that I could do, and everybody had chosen all the favorites, you know, all the, you know, the Enjoy the Silence and you know, all the hits, really. You know, everyone else had chosen all the other the mixers who were going to be making mixes for this compilation had chosen all these classics, if you like, you know, Personal Jesus and whatever.
Oh, yeah.
And at the very bottom, you know, you got the ones that nobody wanted to do, and there was like Sweetest Perfection, and I think Violator is probably my favorite Depeche album, really. And
okay.
I was like, I could do something else, but I want to do that because it's difficult. Right? It's not easy, this track. It's never been an easy track, and it's not an easy track. I thought, what can I do with this track? How can I make it something else, you know? And so I did this track, and unfortunately it didn't get onto the compilation because my dad had a triple heart bypass and a heart attack or something, he got pushed over and broke his hip. Yeah, and he was already sort of 89, like in 88 or whatever, and he broke his hip, and so I had to go back to the UK, stop the mix, and go back to the UK, and we missed the deadline because we had to be finished by a certain deadline, and it just happened to be like my dad had this accident, so I had to go back to England and missed the deadline. And I thought, oh fuck it, you know, I'm not going to be on the compilation after all that, you know. And then when I made this album called 5.1, because I did the mix in surround sound, because I thought it'd be nice for them to have a track in surround sound as well. And so I made the mix in surround sound, and I made it, and then I decided I'd make an album like that. So I did various other remixes, also Underpass as well. I did in surround sound, and I thought it'd be nice to have a surround sound album of people that are not King Crimson and Pink Floyd. I think Depeche Mode had done a couple of surround sound albums at this point. I was thinking I needed to get a few other artists in there in this kind of surround sound thing, and Underpass was one, and Depeche became another, and then they gave me the permission to release it on my 5.1 album. And it's the only time ever that Depeche Mode have allowed anyone to release a track that had never been released before of theirs. It still is. It's still the only track that's
is that right?
never on any other record. It's only on 5.1.
Wow, is that right? Well, then you'll be able to get me an interview with Martin then, won't you?
Oh, for sure.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I would love to
Well, he's in
talk.
American. He might,
Yeah,
he might do it.
yeah. I would love. Oh, he's too busy. Yeah, and you probably have to go through several agents just to
No,
get
I can't.
to. Yeah, I
The big
know.
role that you're going to have to go to try and get him to do it.
I know. I
How
know.
many interviews has he done in the last, like,
See,
25
see,
years?
see that? Right, right, right. See, well, I have to just put in my 2 cents. I think Black Celebration is my favorite Depeche Mode album. Yeah.
Oh, I mean, I love that too. Don't get me wrong. It's like,
Yeah, yeah,
Black Celebration is also like absolute. It's a very, 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 very close run between
right, right.
and Violator. Actually, for me,
Yeah,
they're very, very, very close because they both mean so much. I mean, I like all the others as well. Don't get me wrong.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
but are really, really, really like close. And I must say, I like the last album, Memento
Oh,
Mori. I thought that was a really nice album actually.
yeah. I
It
think,
belongs in my kind of holy trinity.
but one of my probably all-time favorite tracks from Depeche Mode is "The Sun and the Rainfall" from A Broken Frame.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, I just love that. Yeah,
That's compared to say something like Songs of Faith and Devotion, which also I think is a great record.
right.
It's like I like that. I like the roughness of that Songs of Faith and Devotion. I quite like that. And then you've got the early era, the first like 3-4 albums where they're still very young and still still learning their curve. Really, it's before they got here. Yeah, before they got to Berlin. Because if you look at Depeche Mode, you've got Depeche Mode before Berlin and Depeche Mode after Berlin, and after Berlin was like then a completely new era for the band. It really like changed everything for the band. Berlin.
Very true, very true. Well, speaking of your remixes, this is a band that kind of flew under my radar, but I'm definitely going to be looking into them a little bit more deeper. Saw Doctors, the Man in the Moon remix. Now, how recently did you do that remix?
Very recently, very recently, a few months ago. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. They're like Irish legends. These guys.
I missed that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, in Ireland, people know who they are because they're huge in Ireland. People know them for such a long time, and they've got their own kind of following, and all the Irish communities which are situated around the world all kind of know who they are too. Yeah, like they're playing right now in the United States, from what I can gather, because they've got quite a following there. And a friend of mine who's an entire living in Ireland, he knows them, got to know them very well, did a few videos for them in the past, and he said, he just jokingly said, it'd be really good if you could do a remix for them. Do you think you'd be interested? I well, I don't know. Like, send us the song, and I'll let you know if I feel anything. And it was The Man in the Moon, and I immediately thought, well, it's got a really nice message. This song, it's a really endearing kind of sound, And I was like, how does that like translate into something that I do? But I didn't want to go too far from what they do normally, but I thought, how does that translate somehow? I wanted to give them some kind of a different audience almost, if you like. Yeah. And I really enjoyed doing it. It was also a real challenging remix to do. Yeah.
Oh, what's it? Okay. Yeah, I love that. I love that line, the chorus, when the man in the moon looks up here and sees us, he won't see much distance or difference between us,
Yeah.
I think that's the way if we could just look at humankind that way, and have more of that kind of outlook. Yeah.
Well, that's really one of the reasons why I wanted to do the mix, really, because I thought the song's got such a powerful message, even though it's really kind of like subtly presented. It's got a really nice message to it, and I think if people listen to the mix and they understand the message, then that's all really what we want, really.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. Well, I'm glad, and you were involved in the restoration of the soundtrack for the sci-fi film on the Silver Globe.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to try to pronounce the original title on that.
Globe.
But it really comes to life. Was that in surround, or is that the latest Dolby, or what? I mean, that just
no.
Okay.
I mean, this is a film from 19. It was it took 10 years to make this film. It was started in 76 and ended in 86 by Andrzej Szulawski, who was a Polish film director who'd grown up in Paris, and he was the bad boy of Polish cinema. And he made this particular film practically almost finished, and then the culture minister was changed, and he didn't like what Szulawski did, and so he said, "You're not finishing your film. You've run over budget. You're not going to make this film." And he burnt a fifth of his film and destroyed it, and said, "You can't do it." And Szulawski then secretly finished making this film. He would do jobs elsewhere and get money and film in like Mongolia, in the Caucasus and places like this, and filmed this science fiction film in these places. But he was very unhappy with it, really, because when he kind of gave it its first premiere at Cannes, the Polish government presented all kinds of problems for him and stuff, and he was unhappy that it hadn't been really finished, and so no one ever got to see it. Yeah. The soundtrack was made by Andrzej Kozinski, and he, over these 10 years, he started off with a classical kind of like orchestral soundtrack, very beautiful. And then as the years progressed, while they were secretly making this movie, new instrumentation came into being, like a 303. So there's a bit of like 303 action going on in one track, and then he was interested in this krautrock thing, and so he had a bit of kind of krautrock blues thing happening in the track. So you've got industrial music, like industrial tracks, which sound like Einstürzende Neubauten, kind of ideas, but not with samplers, just made with actual kind of tapes and stuff. And that's the soundtrack, and no one had ever kind of like done anything with this soundtrack or anything. It was like no one. It was never been released as a record, as a soundtrack album. And when Mondo Vision asked me if I would be interested, because I'd been part of the kind of like research for this film, trying to track it down, trying to get the rights to release it in the early 90s. And I'd failed because of like the amount of money that the Polish people wanted for the company wanted, who owned the rights. They wanted a ridiculous amount of money, so I couldn't do it. But I was always interested in trying to like getting this film released and restored as a first of all as a VHS, and then as a DVD, and now as a Blu-ray. So when Mondo Vision came and said that they'd acquired the rights to release it in the United States, they asked me if they wanted to do a soundtrack CD accompaniment with the DVD and the Blu-ray, and they asked me if I would restore the soundtrack. And so we got the parts, all the different elements from Kozinski, and remastered everything, and they wanted it to be the same tracks that appear in the film, which was an impossibility because Kozinski recorded pieces of music which were like a mile long. And Szulawski, the director, had just chosen a little snippet and put that in. So it was like trying to find out. It took months to kind of go through the film and find out which bit belonged to which part on the tape, And then we put it all together, and that was just recently released end of May on Mondo Vision. The film as a 4K Blu-ray in a beautiful box set. And that CD is part of that beautiful box set, and I'm very, very proud of that. That
I was going to say, you must be very
first
proud.
time it's ever been released as an album ever. Yeah.
Okay. Wow. And now that's not. Will it ever be available on any app? On any?
No. No, not at the moment. It won't be.
Okay.
I don't know about the future. That's debatable in the future. I mean, preferably, I'd like it to be released as a vinyl. I know Finders Keepers in the UK, a label who'd released a lot of really super interesting Eastern European music, and they'd released
I have a few Finders Keepers. Yes.
Great label. Unfortunately, the label closed at the beginning of the year, but they were planning on releasing the vinyl of it, and I don't know if that's going to still happen, but I hope it will. I really do, because I think it's on the Silver Globe is, for me, it's one of the most fascinating science fiction films you'll ever see. And if you look at the Mondo Vision trailer that I made.
Yes.
On YouTube, you will see how the beautiful music works with the fantastic images.
It does. It just comes to life again. It just brings it all to life. And I was dumbfounded. I mean, even the video, the filming of it looks more recent than '88. It looks a whole lot more recent.
76.
Right. It doesn't look that old at all.
There's no CGI. It's all
right.
What you see on the screen, it's all been done. And the places where he filmed, Zhuravsky filmed in like some salt mine somewhere, in Poland and in the Caucasus, in the desert, in the Mongolia and desert, and it's like gobsmacking. Actually, the images are fabulous. It's like a Shakespearean play. It's kind of very over dramatic in parts, but it's a beautiful movie.
Right. Well, who was the one? Herzog.
Werner Herzog.
Yes.
He made
With
some very special.
Klaus Kinski. Yes. What was the name? Fitzcarraldo.
But they actually transported a ferry, a huge steamboat ferry over the mountains with real people in real time.
Right. That's the kind of that I get from that. Wow. Well, I did listen to you and Alanas. I'll just say Alanas. Children of Nature. And I gotta say, I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
And here are some of my favorite tracks off of that I listened to. I like the dulcimer in the "How Do You Feel," the first track. I like that.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, that was
that James Bondy kind of feel to
it. Does. It has that spy kind of. It does.
I was inspired by John Barry.
Yeah. Well, that comes across real well in that. Yeah. Nice to get Addition again. Like I said.
Yeah, I've used it quite. I think it's it's got its own particular kind of sound.
Yes, it does. Well, it's been used quite a bit with folk music and stuff, but I like to see it used in other types of music. Interjected in there. Well, All Alone is another one that I really like.
Thanks.
Yeah. I was kind of
that was like we'd done that just before the pandemic, and when we came to actually release the album, we wanted the first single was going to be All Alone, and it was like, okay, we'll do something which kind of like reflects the situation of people being stuck in isolation during the pandemic, and that's how that video came about, really.
Yeah. No, I looked on YouTube. I didn't see a video for How Do You Feel. I saw
one for All Alone.
Okay. I do see All Alone. I think the other tracks I see video, but I didn't see one for How Do You Feel. Well, another one that I like is a Stand Up. I like Stand Up.
Yeah.
That's a nice one. And then I like the guitar in Losing My Mind. I like that.
Yeah. That song was actually made for a film.
Oh, was it?
That's how our collaboration began, actually, with Losing My Mind. It was made for a soundtrack for a film called Call of the Wolf, a French movie. I don't know if it's available in the States to stream or something. It might be on Netflix or something like that. But that film, the director wanted me to do a track which would appear in a love scene. You can't hear it in the film, actually, but it's like we made this song for this love scene. And that's my first kind of like interaction, if you like, with Alanas. Yeah. Okay. And then we just did other tracks after that and made these two albums. We did 2 albums. Yeah.
Okay. He's got a nice voice too, as well. Yeah. Yes, he does. Well, you guys work real well together. It seems.
Thank you.
Yeah. I like the videos as well. Like the imagery you've got going on there. Well, Mark, is there anything else that you'd like to mention, or maybe we overlooked, or any other gaps you'd like to fill in? Can you think of?
Well, there's only the future to look forward to, really, for me. I mean, I'm doing music all the time, so hopefully something will appear. I mean, the last between doing Saw Doctors and my last album, I did an album called it was a soundtrack for Can Creativity Save the World, which is a documentary film by Herman Vasker, which is it's just a talking heads documentary. It's not about a particular subject. It's just about can creativity save the world, and him asking all kinds of people in the art world what their opinion is on this question, whether it be David Bowie or Kate Blanchett or Gary Kasparov or somebody like this. Like he's asked all these different people, and myself included, like, can creativity save the world, and gets an answer, and that's the answer in the film. And for that film, I did the soundtrack for that film, and then also for that film also because it's about the world, I did a remake my version of Lovers of the World, which I'd originally done with Alien Nation.
Okay.
And that was one of the last things I did recently.
Okay. But you stay busy. I know you stay busy. Yeah, keeps you off the street, as they say, right?
It keeps my mind occupied.
Keeps your mind occupied, exactly.
Yeah, you know, and I've just done 2 tracks with Craig Walker from Archive.
Oh, okay.
You know,
We were talking about, yes.
We'll see what we do with those. We only did those last week, so I can't really kind of contemplate on what's going to happen.
Well, keep me up to date, and any new remixes you do, if you don't mind sending me the file or whatever, I'd love to hear them. So
yeah. Well, maybe you can listen to Craig's new album. He's just done a new album.
Oh, okay, all right.
And it's a really beautiful album, actually.
Oh, okay. Oh, I'd be very interested in that. Yeah, hearing that. All right. Well, again, thank you, Mark. Thank you, Mark.
You're very welcome. Thank you very much, Greg.
Danke. I do know a little, very little, but yeah, it's been very, very enjoyable.
Thank you.
I love hearing you guys' stories and your journey, as they say. So that's what I like sharing with people. So
yeah, thank you. Yeah, I hope people, if they listen to this, they'll be curious enough to like check it out on YouTube or whatever.
Right. Do you have
they won't be able to see B movie, not unless they find it on some dark website somewhere. But if they want to get a bit of an insight into what the film looks like, they should just listen to the Singularity single by New Order, because they used footage from B movie as their video for Singularity. Yeah.
Okay. Check
so
that
they get
out.
a glimpse of what B movie's like.
There you go. You give them a little taster, as they
So
All right. Whet that appetite. Yeah. Okay. All right, Mark. It's been very enjoyable. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All the best.
Right.
Thank you.
All right. And
Bye-bye.
stay in touch. All right. Bye-bye for now.
Certainly will. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.